Yeah.
Engage with the National Organic Program.
Then you get to meet other parents. See the parents of the kids, like, your kids come home and talk about
The chickens just came out last week.
Also,
It's been so dry. It's the ground hasn't had any water since last year when that was hydrated. We're on flight. Take a little bit of work. Soon.
And my kid is a social butterfly, so he always wants to invite, like,
Yeah, pretty much. We're happy the chickens are out. We don't
about that.
It's in the fall. It gets its eggs earlier.
And all of them.
Because they spend the entire eggs a little bit earlier than most people. We can't really start stuff in terms of veggies as early, but eggs are good.
Keeping us nourished, you know. Ernie loves hard-boiled eggs. We'll eat them just constantly. We saved it for you.
Hot seat.
oh, yeah, yeah, 'cause
Oh, you still got prominent location. I'm just gonna move the camera wherever you go.
Everyone right here.
They just fertilize them all winter. And
Yeah, hopefully not too hard to raise. Like drinking it out and composting it outside.
I know, I was like,
This is only our second year doing it. So like if we were to do it year after year after year, that'd probably be
I
it.
was like, I'm looking at myself.
2
I don't know why I find myself. It's human nature, but I find myself so distracting. Yeah.
Joe had a meeting today where they recorded him speaking, so he was listening to himself speak.
That's the worst.
Presentation, I'm like, well, I recorded the last one, so then I got to listen to myself.
I did that once in college, and I was like, why am I like moving like this while I'm doing my public speaking? I didn't feel myself doing it, but watching myself in the video, I'm bobbing all over. Yeah, it's terrible.
no, I looked online.
Love the colors.
Thank you. Beautiful cardstock.
Yeah, because I think we need to be closer.
Okay, so you look for the summary.
So I just pulled this thing off.
Oh, really?
There would be messages on it too. I get
No.
Chinese
Remember, it's like, oh, check. Pops out of bed, turns on all the lights. Yeah. She's like, are you sure?
I'm gonna
It's a little past 6 o'clock. There might be some people trickling in, but in respect of everyone's time, we wanted to get started right away. You'll note that at the end we have kind of a questions discussion piece, and we had asked for pre-submitted questions, and we didn't get any. So that part of our evening is going to be a little bit different, and so that's why we put Post-its and pens out on the table so that you could. We figured that maybe people didn't know what to ask or know enough to know what to ask, and so we would ask you to take note of your questions as we're sharing information, and then we'll collect them and get back to everybody before the end of the week over email, and we'll just kind of play it by ear how the last part of our agenda goes. So we're just going to start with introductions. I'll start. I'm Megan Gustafson. I'm the district administrator here at Lafarge and a member of the leadership team, and I'm also a parent of a first grader at Forest School.
And I'm Julia Buckingham. I'm a first grade teacher at the school and also a member of the leadership team.
And I'm Robin Hoseman, a 4K, 5K teacher and also a member of the leadership team.
My name is Jimena Puig, and I'm on the leadership team, and I've been working on school documents a couple days a week this year. I'm John Alkisa. I am in the office full-time. I'm the leadership and planning coordinator and also on the leadership team. So I'm there to answer emails and phone calls.
Some other staff.
I'm Mariella Lineberger. I work with Robin.
And I'm Celia Carr, and I'm a para with the 4K, 5K too.
And then we have.
Oh yeah, and then I'm Dan McCarron. I'm one of the other 4K, 5K. I couldn't quite see if there's somebody else around the floor.
Yeah.
Governance Council? Yeah.
I'm Jen Oyam. I'm the Governance Council and parent of one, soon to be two, Forest Schoolers.
I'm Beth Unger, also on the Governance Council with no children.
I'm Prudence Tippins, also on the Governance Council.
I'm Emily Schembel. I am recently joined the Governance Council, and I also have one soon to be two children in fourth school.
Oh, it's challenging to
Lori
hear.
Drake, parent representative on the Governance Council, and yeah, mom to a kindergartner.
And we have two members of the Lafarge School Board here too.
Aaron Nemec, President, Lafarge School Board.
Holly Franks.
Okay, so for people who are online, when we're giving information, we'll stand very close to the microphone. But I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear any comments or questions from the audience. But those will be recorded too.
Do we want to introduce Anne Marie and
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. Okay. And online we have Anne Marie Fryer, who's our Governance Council co-president, and Barb Sarnowski, who's also on the Governance Council, along with some parents, it looks like.
All right. So I thought I'd start out with just a little bit of history. So some of us have been working with the Forest School since its inception, and it's really easy for us to forget what we know that you all don't know. So I'm going to try to just backtrack a little bit, give you the origin story of KVFS for a little context, and certainly if you have questions, it can be informal while I give you the history. I started working at KVR in 2001 at the Kickapoo Valley Reserve, and I was the education director there for 20 years. And I had a relationship with all of these good people during that 20 years. Some of them worked as instructors at KVR. Really, they all did, actually. Yeah. So we along with lots of other people, Barb Sarnowski, some of our governance council members, really got involved in the education program at KVR. And as that program developed through the years, we really started to realize that where we made the most impact with children was when they were spending lots and lots of time in nature. So like full nature immersion. And that's what we were hearing from parents, feedback, people wanting more time with their children in nature. So through the years, I piloted a lot of programs. Some of you are familiar with our summer camp program. We had weekend immersion programs. We tried a lot of different things that were mostly met with a lot of positive response. And so I guess it was in about 2017, a few of us got together and started to think about, well, how could we offer more nature immersion to more children at zero cost, if possible, because as some of you know, it costs to go to camp at KVR. So we started to brainstorm that. We did a lot of research. We started studying forest school models in Europe. We visited a lot of preschool and forest school models in Wisconsin and Minnesota. We went to conferences. We studied play and nature models. And we wrote sort of a draft business plan, and then started to pilot a nature immersion program at KVR, where the 4K from this school, from Lafarge School District, came over every Friday for half a day for 2 years. So we worked out some of the kinks just with that half-day program. And then Jimena came on board in 2019, I think, and we started our Forest Fridays program, which was a tuition-based drop-off program, immersion program for 3, 4, 5, I think. Mm-hmm. And that was also met with a lot of great positive feedback, and we thought, like, how can we scale this? Parents want it more than a half a day. So we put together a committee and decided to
You're fine.
Okay, decided to think about writing this Department of Public Instruction charter school grant. It was a big undertaking. We got unanimous support from the KVR board and the Lafarge School Board to go ahead and write this grant. We hired a grant writer. We all worked together for, 4 or 5 months to put this grant together. Submitted it right before COVID hit, February 2020. And then we just sat around and waited and watched the pandemic unfold and had no idea what was gonna happen. But in June of 2020, I got an email in my inbox that said, "You've been awarded $700,000. And we were like, oh my gosh, we were so excited. So the way that the grant works is we were given a planning year. So it worked perfectly with the pandemic because everybody was shut down. Schools were online, the KVR was closed. So we had this planning year where we could stay home and write policies and procedures and write handbooks and form a governance council and train ourselves for a whole year with grant money to really prepare to open our doors the following year. So that felt really good. So when we were awarded that grant, as you can imagine, KVFS became its own entity. And Julia's going to talk about what a charter school is in just a minute. But KVFS is its own entity. It is authorized by the school district of Lafarge, and it's cited on the KVR. But it doesn't really belong fully to either place. It has its own governance council and its own budget. So it really is its own thing. And so, as you can imagine, there's a lot of stakeholders. There's KVR stakeholders, there's school board stakeholders, and there's the first school stakeholders. So we managed to make one of the most complicated but exciting schools on earth, I think. And then as you know, we opened our doors in 2021 to 4K in kindergarten. And then last year, we expanded to first grade in this current school year. And next year will be our 4th year of the grant, and we'll add 2nd grade. And then our final year, the 5th year of the grant, will be at full capacity, and we won't have very many dollars left in the grant either at that point. So we'll be able to really kind of look at what we've accomplished and plan for the future from there. So I think that kind of wraps up the history. I'm going to hand it over to Julia to talk a little bit about what a charter school is, and then we can also field questions at any point about these things.
Okay. I apologize if I made anyone online dizzy. Can you hear us if we keep talking like this? Thumbs up maybe.
Oh, good.
Great. Okay. So it's very exciting to talk about the idea of a charter school within the larger Wisconsin public schooling system, because having a charter school authorized by a school district, which is what we are, is a really great way for little schools to have the opportunity to innovate within the large public schooling of the Department of Public Instruction. And so with Lafarge being our authorizer, we have this opportunity to have our own sort of accountability, our autonomy when we are able to work on different curriculum or provide wonderful, lovely opportunities for children to be outside and opportunities for them to engage in what might not be a typical legacy school interface. And so with that autonomy, we do have that accountability to make sure that we do uphold the importance of children going to school. We do need to follow Wisconsin state standards. We have a few little prompted tests throughout the year that we have to make sure that we provide. We have performance measures that the Lafarge School District has, that we report on to the Lafarge School District to show that we are providing opportunities for the children at or above what the current students at Lafarge School District are doing. And we have the larger accountability too to the Department of Public Instruction through our performance measures, through the use of our governance council, who helps us oversee our mission and vision of our school. And it's just a really wonderful relationship. Like Janelle was saying, we have all of these people involved to create this charter school that is public and has opportunities for children to have a different curriculum. So, what was I going to say? Oh, another part of that accountability piece is with the grant funding that we received from the Department of Public Instruction, we have audits, which actually Janelle and Megan and governance council members have been ramping up for the end of August, an extensive audit that goes through all of the policies and procedures and paperwork that we've been working on for years. And so that is at the end of April, and that's just one more accountability measure. So the real beauty of the charter school is able to innovate within a small community and still make it public and accessible to everyone.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say about the resources that we can access being connected to the district. That'd be helpful.
Sure.
So share.
Yeah, so there are lots of different opportunities to be a charter school, right? You could have, I think charter school sometimes gets that bad rap when like, corporations might be the umbrella of a charter school, but being umbrellaed within the school district, we have opportunities to receive pupil services, lunch program, transportation, all of those extra comforts in a way to be associated with the school district are great to be available to our students as well.
Any tech-savvy people in the room? I'm not sure why our video is cutting out.
It keeps losing connection to your microphone and your camera, so it keeps reloading and causing it to pause.
Okay. I don't know.
Rather than sitting here for half an hour, it's just going to be a problem, and probably for next time someone can make it better.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Matt. Saved us all a bunch of time.
Yeah, so I mean, I really just want to emphasize that opportunity to be able to create our own policies, to create our own curriculum, all within the guise of still being, the umbrella of still being a public school. So that's why, and Wisconsin has a very robust charter school programming, and they're very supportive, and that's why they offer large grants like this, just to school districts to innovate. And so it's just really great that they're really excited about our first school.
Okay. So we had talked in preparing for this meeting about really wanting to ground into celebrating and honoring what we've accomplished so far in this very new and special experience of teaching and learning together on the KVR with your wonderful children and with our curriculum and our carefully and intentionally crafted program. And so we talked about having photos for you to see, and we apologize for this, for not being able to show them, but having the opportunity for each of us to share a little tidbit about what makes forest schooling magical and what is so worth caring for and upholding in this work that we do. So today was an example of a beautiful forest school day. We were able to hike out in the wind and the heat to a fantastic creek on the reserve, and to get all the way up into the valley where it's sheltered by these big this cathedral of trees. And the children were immersed in water work and water exploration, team building, dam building, looking at water striders, noticing the new growth in the woods from the spring plants coming up, and just what that means for a group of children, all at different stages in their own development and their own journeys, coming together and grounded in this experience together in the woods. And so we see so much each and every day in the children that you've entrusted into our work with their ability to care for one another, care for the environment, and that ethic of care is something that really pulls all of us together each and every day and recharges our batteries when we're so exhausted from our work, which it is very tiring. You can probably see it.
We all know.
Yeah. But like for example, this winter when winter and spring were coming together, we had lots of mud play, and the snow was just a little bit of lingering snow, and some of you know from these stories we've shared. Children coated head to foot in mud, and how they would help each other clean off their gear because they know how important it is to take care of their gear, and to know when another child is struggling with a boot or a mitten or a lost hat, or they just don't feel like getting dressed anymore, and another child will cheer them on. So that ethic of care is something that we see each and every day in hundreds of micro moments and beautiful, larger moments where things really take our breath away. But we just wanted to share a little bit about that. So all the members of our team.
And
speak
the
up.
scaffolded skills that they learn, right? So what they've learned so much in 4K or kindergarten, and then how they can build upon that and like even expand. Like for instance, the first graders, we walked out of the creek up this steep hardwood mixed forest with Claytonia spring beauties, not blooming yet, but you could see them all coming up. So we found the deer trail, and I encouraged them all, so step where the person in front of you steps, so we can all go in a line. And they so all together stayed in a line and were able to have so much self-control hiking up this very steep hill all together, knowing that the impact was going to be so much less if they were to stay together up and over the hill. And it was just so wonderful to see these scaffolded skills, because I was able to have a lot of these children and see a lot of the children in kindergarten, and now having them again in first grade, and it's just amazing to see their love and respect and just like pure joy about all of these things in the natural world. So it's pretty spectacular.
Yeah, I was going to add on to Robin's description of the playing up this creek valley. So I was lucky enough to get to go out with them this morning, which was really fun. And it's the most magical, beautiful valley. And all of the children immediately were so deeply immersed in their play. And watching it, you can see, after you've watched them for a while, all of this. I mean, so sometimes people ask us, like, well, did they just play all day? But there's just so much happening in those moments. So there's this little meandering stream. They're building little dams. They're seeing like what holds the water in, what doesn't hold the water. They're watching the water spiders and how they move. They're digging out little ponds and then like trying to line them so the water doesn't seep out. And they're negotiating with each other as they're all crowding into these small spaces, but somehow outside there's always enough for everyone. There's like learning about what happens when you go into that deep part and then your boots are filled with water. They're just like, there's the different little spots in the creek and why something is here and not over here. There's so much really, really, really deep learning that's happening in those moments, and we celebrate that along with just really giving children the opportunity to be children and do these things that if we had the experience of doing them as small children, we look back on with such fondness and know that they shaped us in some way and how we live in the world now. And seeing their overwhelming joy at being in that beautiful place and getting to share it with them. Yeah, and that happens for these forest school children every day. They get that magic and that deep, deep learning that will inform them about how the world works. And we just really celebrate it.
Right?
Yeah.
Right, absolutely.
I think you're getting a little teary-eyed, Robin.
And we did have some numbers to share that were pretty exciting. Do you want to read some?
I know one was 150 hikes.
Yeah, that we've like just this year alone, we've taken 150 hikes. We've geared up 300 times. So boots, snow pants.
We had 26 play spaces that we identified that were walking distance from where our homerooms are.
Yeah, 26. So,
that they know very deeply.
Right. They know by name, by heart, by ecosystem, by flora and fauna, features, which of those places supports different types of play.
And memories.
Yes.
Memories of that. Remember that one time I did this here? Yeah. It's really awesome.
It says flew kites, carved, told stories, felted wool, scooted scooters, cross-country skied, snowshoed, and pen-paled with children 5,280 miles away on the migratory bird route.
So lots to celebrate this year.
Yeah, and I thought of another thing, just that there's, I mean, as you all know from trying to get your children dressed in all their layers, sometimes there are tears and sometimes there's lying on the floor and kicking your legs and yelling, and there's also just so much resilience that's built up, and we see that happening over the course of the year, along with all the resilience they develop from having their boots full of water and sand and like walking back to school and feeling the wind on their face and getting pricked by briars and all of the strength that they build up to move through difficult things and move through them. What a great life skill.
See how what you do after your boot does get filled with water. Thanks for hearing that. Yeah.
My part. So, all of that wonderful, beautiful work happening and over time and transition, and as we're growing as a school, we've encountered a little bit of some growing pains at our host site. And so, as our, we have close to 50 children on site at the visitor center site every day this year. Next year that will be closer to 64 plus 10-ish staff and some volunteers and some parents coming and going. And so the KVR staff and board has been having a lot of discussions with us about just some of their very real and relevant concerns that they have about impact at that site. And so some of I'll get into those things, but just to back up a little bit, the school district of Lafarge rents space at KVR for a school, and we have a document called the facilities agreement that really spells out what spaces are leased, and so we've done that for the past 2 years. This year, our lease includes the 2 Prairie Springs buildings, the kind of standalone one-room classrooms, the classroom within the visitor center, the library within the visitor center, which is the KVFS office, and then we have the east bay of the garage building for some storage. And also Julia made it into a classroom during the first half of the year. So that's our facilities agreement for this year, and those are the spaces in addition to lots of the outside spaces that we use. And some of the impacts that have been brought to our attention and that we've been really working hard for a number of months to problem solve around include just impacts on how the use of those spaces affect KVR's operations. So there are some concerns about traffic flow and vehicles coming in and out of their maintenance garage. The use of the visitor center classroom means that that classroom isn't available for school groups and things for KVR programming during the school year. The use of the garage means that they are out one space for vehicle storage. There's a lot of problem solving around children using the public bathrooms that are in the visitor center and outside there. And then there is also some concern just in how we're working together that KVS is consuming some important KVR staff time. And so all of those things have been continued to be talked about. There's also some concern about how KVFS students interface with the public. The visitor center itself and the grounds remain open to the public during the school day. And there are some opportunities for interaction out on hikes and within the visitor center. There have been some concerns raised about school safety and security. And then lastly, there's concern about environmental impact. So all of those little feet kind of in a confined space just have some impact in terms of some vulnerable spaces, and there's also been some concern brought up about impact on Ho-Chunk cultural sites. And so, as I said, based on those concerns, there's been a large volume of discussions with leadership team and with the leadership of the KVR about helping to mitigate those. And then out of that arose the idea to revisit perhaps siting the forest school in a different location on the reserve. And this had come up during planning, that discussions about where best the forest school would be sited on the reserve. And at the time, the decision was made that the forest school should remain or be implemented at the visitor center site. And now there's a lot of revisiting that situation and thinking about what could the forest school campus look like across the river off of Core Road. And I can share, I didn't prepare that for tonight, but I can share a map of where that would be in relation to the visitor center site for those of you who aren't aware. So based on all of that ongoing discussion, the decision was made to kind of put on hold this idea of building a permanent third building, education building at KVR for next year. And so some of you maybe have seen the beautiful video that Deanne helped us make that kind of alluded to that project, and that project is on hold while these other conversations are happening. And so where that sits right now is that the company Weezer Brothers has been engaged to give us a proposal for a feasibility study of those 4 different sites. That proposal came in significantly higher than was quoted, and so while that's being looked into, we have just pivoted to looking at siting a temporary classroom at the visitor site for the 23-24 school year. And I met with them yesterday, and they're pulling together some numbers, and so that is the plan for this coming school year for 23-24, our first year of full enrollment with 4K kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, that we will continue to use the visitor center classroom, Prairie Springs 1 and Prairie Springs 2, and have a temporary mobile structure of some kind house our 4th classroom. And then in addition to that being kind of our short-term plan, we'll continue to study the feasibility of potentially relocating the Forest School campus to elsewhere on the reserve. So that's kind of the big news with our facilities planning. And we are committed to keeping everybody posted and in full transparency as we move through that. Unfortunately, I don't have, I was hoping to have a little bit more information from that Weezer Brothers feasibility study to share before this evening, but that plan is sort of full steam ahead at this point.
So you're saying like, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
What do you mean when you say full steam ahead? Meaning information gathering?
Oh, I mean, all signs point to that being exactly what will happen. The KVR board is on board with that. The leadership at KVR I met with yesterday.
Meaning a transition to the core road site,
No,
or meaning just everybody being at the visitor center?
For next year, that's for sure.
Okay.
And then,
That's what
yes,
you're
we'll continue to study this feasibility with potentially moving, and there's a lot of more conversations to have at that point. But, you know, originally I guess if you had asked us a year ago, we would have said we would be in a permanent classroom, and that's not the case. We're in a temporary classroom. All these other conversations are continuing to happen.
So if I could reiterate, you're saying that the reserve is getting annoyed that there's all these kids running around, so they
No,
want
I'm saying
us
that there's
to
some
move there.
very real concerns about the impact that the school has on their operations. And while we're continuing, you know, and I think they're all, realistic concerns that deserve some problem solving and some time to look into how best to serve. And it may well be that the reserve feels that the visitor center site is not the best option for Forest School, and that those conversations are just ongoing at this time. Yeah. And then Jimena was going to share a little bit more about our planning for next year.
Yeah. So meanwhile, there's all this stuff happening, and meanwhile the children will just buzz along, you know. And I just read a beautiful poem by Mary Oliver that I wish I had brought with me about children seeing spring and how that gives us the opportunity to see again, to really see, to not just be like, oh, here we are again, but to see it. And I feel like that. So there will be all these firsts that they experience out on the grounds of the KVR, finding their first violet flower, for instance, and that will be so exciting and beautiful, and we'll be there with them in that joy about the world that we live in. And then also we're excited to host university students for the first time in the next couple weeks. Some education students from UWL will be coming to observe a little bit and hear about how we're doing outdoor education. That will be exciting. We're working on revising our curriculum documents now that we've been doing this for almost 2 years, looking back and seeing is what we thought was going to happen really happening, and how is it different now, and what can we add, and how can we fine tune it to reflect all that we've learned about doing this kind of education that nobody else is doing. we'll be hiring new teachers in the coming months for next year and training them in this kind of forest schooling that we're doing. And we have full enrollment for our for the coming year, along with a waiting list. And so there's again, a lot to celebrate about what we look forward to.
Yeah, and our last piece is just about our commitment as a team and as a community to carry the vision forward and to make sure that regardless of where we are holding to the idea of abundant outdoor time. We are committed to that, all of us as educators and founders of the school. We are committed to following children's needs and their different developmental stages, social, emotional, academic, and interpersonal needs, and their physical growth and development as well. And then continuing on this journey of instilling care, regardless of where we are, instilling care for one another and care for our environment. And so those tenets remain solid in all of us, and we just want to reassure everyone of that commitment and dedication.
Yeah, so like I shared at the top, we wanted to be able to address any questions that people knew they had ahead of time in a really thoughtful and thorough way, which is why we asked for pre-submission. And we didn't get any, so we're not necessarily prepared to answer thoughtfully and thoroughly the questions that you might have. So I think, we're way ahead of our agenda, so I think we can kind of just, you're welcome to talk amongst yourselves, or if you have any questions for us to, we can write them down. We just want to make sure that all questions are answered, and we still don't know what they are. So,
the sticky notes, if you want to put them,
sure.
on the sticky
Right.
notes and hand them to us.
Right.
So, assuming this feasibility study moves forward and the decision is made to move the campus, does that mean building from scratch all new facilities at that point?
Yeah, that's a good question, and we don't know quite the answer yet.
Sure,
That would be all part of the feasibility study itself.
Right.
Yeah.
So still fact finding, but that's
Yeah.
kind of the assumption is that it would be,
I think there's a pretty wide breadth of options there. I've been so far really impressed with the conversations I've had with the Weiser Brothers and their subcontractors, and they're very creative and have a lot of expertise. So, there's a lot to be determined with that.
Sure. Is that who built the new Prairie Springs, or?
No.
Yeah, sure. No, so the first Prairie Springs building, which is where the oaks are, was built by volunteer labor, entirely.
Yeah.
It was funded, the materials were funded through a donor, the Prairie Springs Foundation, that's why we call them Prairie Springs Building. Paid for all the materials, and then it was completely volunteer labor that built that building. And then the second building was also paid for by the Prairie Springs Foundation, and it was built by a local contractor builder, August Hagen, out of Ontario.
Okay.
Can those structures be relocated?
They are movable.
And
Good
the structures
themselves,
are the structures themselves owned by the forest school?
That's coming up a couple times here, yeah.
Right, they are not, those, so those two buildings are, the money was given to the Friends of the KVR, and that's who then engaged the contractors and bought the materials, and then once the buildings were completed, they were gifted by the Friends of the KVR to the state of Wisconsin, because the state of Wisconsin has to go through a lot of, as you can imagine, the building commission, red tape, to get even a tiny little building like that built. So this was a legal workaround to get these buildings built without having to take a 2-year process to get it done.
And was that the bulk of the grant money went towards those buildings, or is that more for staff?
Right, that's a really good question we should have addressed. So the grant can only pay for professional development, for materials, for consulting. It cannot pay for facilities, brick and mortar. It can't pay for rental, and it cannot pay for salaries. So.
So right now, the salaries are paid through like
It's
some
just-
public funding mechanism.
Yeah, I should have, it was my point to say, that I glossed over, that being a charter school, being authorized by the school district, that all the teachers and all the paraprofessionals are Lafarge School District employees.
And they're paid through the operating budget, which is like the per pupil money that comes in through state and federal
So the
dollars.
grant going away in a few years doesn't mean that like suddenly the teachers aren't getting paid.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Great question.
The grant that we received is an implementation grant, and so the costs are all based around implementation, and then based on our projections, once all of the startup costs are completed, the school will be self-sustainable.
Temporary would be more than tense,
Yeah.
right?
So have you seen?
This is the
those-
father of a first grader.
It was so picturesque though.
And then those Beatles came. It was wonderful.
So the kind of building we're looking at, you've probably seen them on school campuses before. There's sort of those mobile trailers that they pull in when they run out of space in a district before they pass a referendum. So.
Thank you to the parents of the oldest cohort for
Yes.
trailblazing.
And for Miss Julia, who's
Right.
had to endure every transition.
Yes.
So is there anything that we can do right now to help ease the burden that KBR that they're feeling, like, you're saying traffic, like,
Yeah,
is there,
great question.
or planting grass, or whatever they want to do to make it so that they're not so against it?
Yeah, and I want to be clear that there's no against Forest School.
Okay.
The Reserve Board has unanimously stated a number of times that they are very much in support of the Forest School. But yeah, that's a really great question, and one that I think we can round up with the KVR leadership and ask for their input into. As I said, these kind of talks are ongoing, really on a weekly basis at this point.
So basically, like, how can we help limit or minimize the impact that is being created?
Sure,
So
yeah.
it's-
Yeah, that's great.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Has there been any contact or any discussion between like KVR and this Forest School? You know, let's say we do have to move across the street, you know, and being that the two buildings that the KVFS put up are now owned by the KVR, has there been any discussion between the two that say, hey, like, since you're moving your home to the school, if we pay for it, can we like uproot these buildings and move them to where there's less traffic for you, you know,
Yeah.
at your visitor center? Has there
Yeah.
been any discussion
There
between
has
the two
been.
there?
Yeah,
That
there
would
has
be-
been.
Are they on board with that, or I mean, are they like, no, these are gonna stay here? And,
That would all be part of this feasibility study too.
yeah.
We do know that it's feasible to move them, and board members have looked into that and, looked at what that would take, so.
That'd be a big blow, you know, if they're like.
There's been a lot of unofficial conversations. That was one of my biggest concerns. Can those buildings be moved?
Yeah.
And yes, these conversations have happened.
If they're willing to like go, yeah, you know, like.
Well, I think the board, because, as I was the education director, I don't work for the KVR anymore, I work for the Forest School, but, that first building, we really built, because the Forest School, the KVR can use those buildings in the summer for summer camps, so they are useful, and they could be useful over there, but they also know, that those buildings really came into being when the Forest School came on board, because we needed extra space, and so they're, everyone is aware of why those buildings were built, so I think
How significant is the lease revenue that the KVR is getting from the existence of the Forest School? Is that like a meaningful source of revenue for them?
The agreement that was signed this year is that the district rents those 5 spaces for $44,000.
That's not nothing.
Right.
No.
So with the success of this, has any other district approached you, been like, how do we get our kids? Cause I hear it all the time. Man, I wish my kids had something like this. And up north where I am, there's a couple that do part days and everything like that, but everybody wants this, a full emergence of it, cause, you know, they see really what she does. So has another school said, hey, how?
Yeah, all the time. And so we it's a part of our, mission as a leadership team to be supportive of nature immersion for children everywhere. And so we've really tried to, balance how can we help other school districts get something off the ground with preserving kind of our own secret sauce of what makes Kickapoo Valley Forest School special.
Yeah, and also just our staff time, because we have so much to contend to, and I mean, I could probably answer questions like that. That could be a full-time job for me if I wanted it,
Yeah, and with the help of the governance council too, we've talked about how to be mindful of staff time, school time.
Yeah.
And so Janelle has taken a lot of that on her plate, but then also we do have specific parameters that we ask for those people asking us just to save our space and to focus on the children and do what we need to do to, be with them.
So we have now, if schools come to visit and they want to, observe and sit down with the leadership team and talk through some of that, we are charging a nominal fee for our time. Yeah.
Are there any grants available? I know you said our grant's gonna run out in 2025. Is there any planning or writing and process to apply for another grant, or are we not allowed to do that, moving forward past 2025?
We can't apply for another implementation grant, but we could, if the grant is available, which it's not right now, we could apply for a replication grant. And that is part of our planning for looking at offering similar programming for grades 3 and up. But as I said, that grant isn't available right now, but it also isn't, it wouldn't necessarily be not having a grant would not necessarily be prohibitive to expanding.
No, I was just gonna ask, do you know the percentage of kids at the KVFS that are school choice?
At 75%.
So circling back a little bit on the other schools thing, my boss is in Colorado, and he wants to send his daughter to a forest school, and he looked up online, and our school actually was one of the first ones that he found. He's like, hey, Matt, wait a second, that's where your son goes. I'm like, yeah. One of the things I'm curious about is if there's anything that we publish in terms of we have the curriculum you guys are working on in terms of how the kids are doing. I have a lot of anecdotal evidence just of my past, seeing how all my siblings were raised being homeschooled, but seeing how my son is doing there. So I have a lot of anecdotal evidence of how it works, and I'm totally invested in it. But in terms of talking to other people or helping to evangelize that or normalize it, there's not a lot of resources I can point to, so I'm wondering if that's something that, is on people's minds, because I think it would help our school as well, just because people are interested but they don't understand.
There's a manual to be written. There's a.
Okay. I would love to help, but I don't have that resources.
It's totally on our radar for sure. I would say in the meantime, if they're interested in learning more about our school, there's obviously depth of stuff, YouTube videos on our website, and the Owlet is sort of the publication that we're trying to put out to raise awareness about full nature immersion. And then there's lots of organizations and great writers that we all leaned on when we were creating, this school. But you're right. I mean, nobody yet has written the how to build a public forest school manual yet. So we're gonna do it. Just
but even just evangelizing or hero resources to talk about the benefits or why you would choose to do this instead of people going, "Oh, you guys are just hippies." No. I get that sometimes where they're like, "Why would you do that?"
Sure, just some talking points about. I mean, and you guys could rattle those off in your sleep about why this is good.
Right, exactly. But something written down that is
there's
authoritative.
the Norwegian forest school. I mean,
there is.
One of my friends, well, she's a mentor of mine too. I mean, she's like, oh yeah, we did this, and she's 67. So, but she lived in Norway, so she knew about forest school. I was like, oh my gosh. And then when Aubrey, last year, they were like, oh yeah, there's this lady doing it in her backyard, and she's got a forest school, and you should go check it out. And then we found you guys, and we're like, okay, we're gonna do that instead. 'Cause
We signed up on the last day.
yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But it's just
So
interesting,
glad.
'cause that was my first interaction was last year, even before we moved here. It was like, oh, what's this forest school? And then you guys had it, and actually we found out from Organic Valley. Joe went for an interview, and they were like, what do you think about this? Check out this pamphlet. And we were like, oh, that's so funny. We just heard about this.
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah.
One thing that's really,
Yeah,
steel mill,
steel mill.
sure, yeah. One thing that's really unique about our forest school that, as far as our research has shown, is that we are the only public forest school, full-time forest school in a partnership with the public lands. So, you know, obviously schools are on public lands, but in the way that our structure is very complicated because we are in this relationship with this amazing resource in the Kickapoo Valley Reserve. So that is something that's really interwoven with our creation, but it's also something that's really unique.
I think it's one of the most important reasons for the school to be successful, I think, because I think one of like the core issues that a lot of us struggle with is, or that our society struggles with, is how people relate to nature and how people relate to this idea of sort of public land versus home. So I think like having to answer these questions of like, what does it mean to like inhabit a place during the daytime and how to not have too much impact, like that whole part of the process of trying to figure that out is what makes the school successful. And so I don't know, I think while this, like the challenges with the siting are like frustrating and creating a lot of work for you guys and anxiety for the parents, that's also sort of part of the experiment that we're all trying to work through.
Right. And we all know or most of us know the story of this valley. And we see so much hope in working with young children in this particular time, in this particular climate, and the hope that working with young children in this particular way. So yeah, just to add to what you're saying, there's something pretty special going on.
Yeah.
We're taking a class with Peter Allen, if you're familiar with him, a permaculture class, and it came up this morning is the idea of ecological literacy.
Yeah.
Knowing the plants, knowing the birds, the flowers, and I think that's so important and just something that is so valuable that our daughter's able to get immersed in that. So thank you for that.
Well, and also it's teaching the children, right? They're not focused on a screen. I mean, everybody gets some screen time, but like, they're not, you know, my nieces and nephews, they're all focused this way, where our kids are now all focused this way. They're not trying to draw on the walls or rip open books and throw papers around going, hey, I'm here, I'm feeling what happens. It's, I'm sticking my hands in the mud. I'm looking at prints, or look at that water strider that's eating the grass that we just picked and put in the water. That's really, really important developmental skills and mental skills. And I think that's the other reason that we find this program so important, because our kids are going to be in tune with everything, not just, you know, mentally, you know, with it. They're going to be emotionally and physically and everything, and that makes a whole person, not just an autonomous being walking around going, hey, let's go play some Minecraft. I can build stuff.
So he had asked what, I didn't catch your name. Frank had asked, what can the parents do now to minimize the impact in our current situation? But the follow-up question to that is, how can the parents be helpful to you in this process of information gathering and decision-making moving forward? Like, what does that process look like? And what are the formats whether that's sort of providing input, fundraising, whatever it is.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I think that's one of those big questions that we'll need to get back to you about.
And we will.
Yeah, we will.
I think it'll be all
Right.
those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna ask something similar, so thank you, because I feel like most of the parents I've met, especially, I mean, I know I can only speak for myself, most parents I've met though are very invested in this, like when we heard about the forest school, I was invested from the get-go, but that's because my dad works in forestry, and I didn't know a whole lot about forest schools specifically, and I still haven't found a whole lot of literature on that, which is part of why I asked the questions, like, I know some exist, but you have to really go looking for it. But one of the things that, you know, I echo is like, I would love to come out and help. I work from home, I have time to help, but I also know it doesn't really help to have 100 parents come in and just be like, okay, we're all here, what's the next thing? So if there's anything that people need that we can help with or you can publish out, I didn't see, for instance, the statement asking for pre-recorded questions. I think most people didn't. I also didn't know enough from the agenda to form a question because I didn't know what we were going to talk about until we got here. So, but you know, things like that, you know, we can think ahead of like what types of things people can help with. I'm sure everyone here is going to help. You know, if it comes to relocating sites, a lot of us can help with building if we have to rebuild or you know, moving stuff or landscaping. You know. I'm good with technology. I can help with that kind of stuff. Everyone's got our skills that we can help. It's just we need to know how to help.
Yeah.
Right.
I have an idea. One thing that I'm hearing lots of excitement for is helping, and I think what would be great to see is a little bit more of a presence when we have our governance council meetings, because a lot of times we're maybe not making decisions directly on some of these things, but there's lots of discussion based on everything that you're hearing there. This is almost like a mini governance council meeting, it feels like. So
I didn't
hearing
realize
this,
those were open to the parents.
they are, they're open to everybody.
I post them in Snail Mail.
I see that they're there, it's more like that's for them to go to, not for.
No,
like,
it's
open
like
to
a
the
board
public.
meeting, they're open to the public, absolutely.
Are those on Google as well?
They're always, they're
Okay.
always a virtual link.
Yeah.
Good
So I
idea.
mean, there is a structure, it is a board meeting, but having people present and informed, I think, is gonna be really important as we move forward and navigate some of this stuff.
Do you guys see this kind of inhibiting the growth of the school as far as ages? I know you're proceeding with grade 2, and I don't know what you anticipated when you first started as far as how far, you know, 3rd or 4th or 5th, or what you kind of saw your vision initially, but is this kind of a setback of growing beyond grade 2nd, or do you not know yet?
I'll say not necessarily. We're in a little bit of a kind of a new situation. When the understanding with the KVR always was that 64 felt like a max amount of kids because of these impact issues, and so the plan always had been to look based on success, look at expanding to upper grades, but that those children's homerooms would not be at the KVR. And so there has been a strategic, about a year, or it was a year and a half ago already now, there was a strategic planning group convened to plan around expanding to 3rd grade and up. And the kind of going theory at that point was that those children's homerooms could exist in this facility, in this building, in some rooms that are upstairs that aren't currently used for classroom space. And that they'd spend, mornings doing kind of classroom work and afternoons doing project-based learning in outdoor spaces around the Kickapoo Valley. So not only at the reserve, but also exploring and doing investigations at like Wildcat Mountain or at Tunnelville Cliffs, or maybe even at some farms and things like that. So that idea is still really really expanding and is really exciting to us. I will say that we haven't, because, dealing with some of these things has impeded our progress on getting those ideas sort of written down and off the ground and shareable in a shareable format to families who we know are asking. But that work will happen this spring and summer, and is still, I think, we have had individual conversations with families who have asked. And based on those, it seems as if there's quite a bit of interest, and we did send, I think we sent one really brief survey out maybe in December, and we got some strong interest with that too. So that could be another way, if anyone's interested in sort of serving on a advisory committee for expanding to upper elementary, that would be another way that you could help if you were interested.
So following on that, or to rephrase it into a question, rephrase it and then ask a question. Basically what you're saying is that we already always knew there was going to be impact to have everyone at the KVR site. It's happened sooner than we expected because we were thinking we could get into second grade before we'd hit that limit, but that's sort of already hitting at first grade is what it sounds like. And so the discussion about moving past second grade is shifted into part-time here, part-time, like basically homerooms existing at the Lafarge school here and traveling there for like third and fourth. Is that something, did I understand that correctly? And
I don't know.
okay. That's fair.
I don't know. So you go.
Yeah, I think when we created the vision, I know when we created the vision, it was just, our vision and mission was early childhood education. And so we wrote the grant for 4K through second grade. And that felt like a big enough chunk.
Yeah, you know what, that's fair. Yeah.
But of course, once we got through our planning year and we had 4K and 5K on the ground, I mean, you all started asking the question, like, what next? Of course, we had thought that through. But because I was working on the KVR at the time and I knew the executive director, who's no longer the executive director, and the board, which has also changed, there's been transition, you know, through those discussions, I think that it was pretty obvious that a full school, like pre-K through sixth grade or middle school housed on the reserve was not feasible. Even just to have that many facilities built was not gonna be feasible. So I think from day one, we knew that pre-K through second grade could be housed on the reserve, and that was the initial agreement. And that if anything grew beyond that, that use of the reserve, I mean, it's a public space, there's 9,000 acres, plus as Megan mentioned, there's so many other public wilderness spaces around here that would have to be incorporated into the 3rd through 5th grade plan.
And I should have noted, another thing I left out in my charter presentation, which I apologize for, is that the Kickapoo Valley Forest School has a 5-year charter contract with the Lafarge School District, School District of Lafarge. And with that, it specifically is only lined out for 4K through second.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Which aligns with what the $700,000 grant that we received from TPI matches up with.
Yeah.
So so it sounds like I did sort of understand, so I appreciate
I think
it.
so, yeah.
The question I had then was basically with the second graders needing some other structure, because was there consideration to housing them in the rooms that aren't being used here?
Oh, sure.
As you were sort of thinking for the third graders, like the second graders just starting to transition there. Not that anyone wants that, and I don't want to like advocate for that necessarily, but it seems like an option where you don't have to put funds into building a temporary structure and can focus entirely on the transition into wherever the final place is going to be. Is that, are those all options that have been discussed,
Yep,
I guess?
that option is definitely on the table, and I think part of the feasibility study, and if anybody attended the last board meeting, the Town of Stark chairman was there, and he threw out the option of using the Town of Stark building, which is up by the dam, so that's also an option on the table, so.
But as a leadership team and staff, we have sifted through all of that in a really thorough way and determined that it's of the most importance, cost aside, to have our first year of full enrollment as in a central space. We don't want to have a protracted campus. So we're putting all of our efforts into the option of having that temporary structure for the first year of full enrollment while we're continuing to study all of the other options.
Awesome.
I know you said there's a 5-year contract with Lafarge School District. After that 5-year contract is up, I mean, Kickapoo Valley Forest School will be much larger also. Will that next contract be like a referendum style vote with the Lafarge School District, or has there been any talk with because they fund the school, right? Lafarge funds Kickapoo Valley Forest School. So, I mean, if we're double the size, that's going to be double the money. Has there been any talks back and forth there? I mean, or is that?
So Erin is our board president.
Or is
Great
the,
question.
or is the school choice money coming in enough to, like, take care of that? Or, I don't know how that works.
Based on our budget calculations, yes. And it, the school board would need to take action on renewing the contract or signing a new contract, but it would be a board action, not public votes.
Okay.
And the momentum right now, we don't know what the four schools would be like in that 5-year,
Yeah.
but so far so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, and we've mentioned too, use of the 1901 building, the upper levels. And like I said, it'd be nice to have it all in one place, that'd be fantastic, but we're open for options too.
Megan, you had mentioned, one of the concerns that KVR had for the school was a safety concern. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think school security is on the forefront of a lot of people's minds, just given what happens in the news. So there have, I think, and the leadership of the KVR is, they're not educators. They aren't, kind of well versed in the rules that schools follow. And so there have just been some questions about, how would we respond to a safety and security threat. And so I think it's just a new thing that has come up for them with having that many children on site every day. And so, yeah, we're continuing to talk about that, and I've been sharing our safety and security protocols with them, and we'll continue to do that. But I think it's just sort of, yeah, to me it just feels really sort of like a growing pain in that this is kind of, they're being asked to sort of be aware of a language that they don't speak.
Sure.
So.
And do the teachers receive any education or training on?
Yeah, so we, all of the Forest School teachers, and all of the Lafarge School District teachers receive the, training with the Vernon County Sheriff's Office every fall, and, we have extensive policies and procedures, and they practice with the children in developmentally appropriate language and.
First aid.
Yep, and they're all first aid trained too.
Another huge benefit of falling under the umbrella of the Lafarge School District.
Right, yeah, that's true. So true.
Thank you.
This is maybe not on the top of sort of people's minds, but, as somebody who went to a public school when I was a kid, I had some misgivings about going to or sending my kid to an alternate school, because it's important to me that public school systems stay strong, and I do have a lot of hesitancy around the charter school model in certain manifestations. So I guess my question is more for you, how can we make the existence of this forest school of benefit to the larger Lafarge School District from an equity perspective?
Yeah, and that is a question that inspired us to ensure that this was a public charter. So there's a lot of misconceptions around the word charter, especially in this state. It's a very interesting and long storied dynamic, but being a public charter allows us to interface with and offer access to children who may not have had that opportunity. And then our hope and our vision is for cross-pollination of our forest school model with the Lafarge School District over time, and with respect for all of the different things that are going on in public education.
And so with that being authorized through the school, all of the money gets siphoned through the school district, and then they allocate our salaries and things for teachers in our operational budget. So hopefully, when we are in operation, that some of the expenses that we use for transportation, speech and language, occupational therapy, all administrative costs for Megan, and all of those costs that we take on can hopefully benefit the district too overall, and pay partial ratios of their costs that they're
with the
working
increased
for us.
numbers of
Mhm,
students,
mhm.
school choicing in.
Yeah,
Right.
okay, good.
questions.
Yeah, that's why.
Helps us.
We just all collectively decided to put you on the spot.
So I don't think anybody said this, but just, I mean, I think there was gratitude expressed, but I, am just stunned at how much has been built, how quickly, with this, so I just really wanna thank everybody who put clearly so much work into this and took like a giant leap of faith. It's a big thing that you've all been doing, and, thanks to the Lafarge School District for, being really good partners there, and the KVR, but also the first generations of parents who also sort of been, blazing the path there, so I just feel really lucky that our son Finn gets to go here. And I think, it's hard to give your kid up for the day to somebody else, but I never think twice about that Finn's coming here, and just what you said, Robin, about this sort of ethic of care, I think is just really at the core of why we feel really great about this. So I just would really want to thank everybody.
To your point, when we were looking for a school for our kid, it was 3 choices were either a Montessori, a Catholic school, or here. So when her mom called me up, I'm like, screw it, let's go. We're outdoor pets, we barely belong on furniture, let's make our noise. So, and it's amazing. And to what you were saying about kids on the tablets, this weekend, she was up with her cousins. Her cousins are all playing on their games, and all of a sudden, like, where's Breely? They're like, I don't know. Here she is outside, no shoes, just playing in the She was looking for frogs. Like, perfect. Tell me next time, and then go do whatever you want.
I think we said it briefly, but the fact that you've chosen to join us and to entrust your children into our school is never lost for a moment on us. And just having you all here tonight and hearing your questions and your care is phenomenal and inspiring. So thank you.
Absolutely. You all know where to find us when you hatch more questions.
I would like to mention, when I first got on the school board, that was an idea that I just threw up there. You're fresh on the school board, we should start a charter school. And it went around the table, and we tried that before, it's not gonna work. And I think, with open enrollment, you want to have something unique, you wanna have something different. And it just kinda got swept away in years, and then all of a sudden, this partnership come up. It's like, hey, this might work. And look at it now. Like this, it's exciting for me to have, many years ago, almost have it shot down. No, we don't know how to do that. Like, well then let's figure it out. And yeah, this is very exciting. And I graduated here from Lafarge, and the idea of a forest school maybe would have benefited me when I was in elementary. So.
Jimena and I are also Lafarge alumni, so it's very
exciting.
Very amazing to bring this back to our
It's very exciting.
It's such a magical thing. I mean, like I said, like my boss wants to send his daughters. Like other forest schools are not the same. Like the one he was looking at is like, oh, there's no buildings, and it's only for a couple of months before it gets really bad winter over in Colorado. It's like, yeah, that's not quite the same. It's like it's really magical. The appeal. Like you look at all the parents here, like there are people who come from public schools, people who come from homeschool, people who come from more like Montessori, or like people who are more just want their kids to be in touch with nature versus just an alternate experience. Like all sorts of different backgrounds and philosophies. And not only is it attracting all of those, but it's executing well. Like I can see my son, and I see all of the same benefits plus other benefits I didn't have. My siblings didn't have homeschool. And when I went to public school, it's like I see a lot of the same benefits, but without some of the problems that I encountered in public school. So it's really just very magical, and you couldn't have said it better. It's like we're all really grateful it exists, and just all the hard work you all put into it.
And how open you guys are, like to Aiden struggled in the beginning of going full time, and we pulled him to 2 days in the afternoons, and now with Robin's recommendation, he'll be up to 4 days a week next week. Like that's huge for a little boy that didn't even want to go to school. He didn't want to leave daddy.
Or my favorite part is the girls. What'd you learn today? Well, I didn't learn anything. But my kindergartner will sit down and start reading the book to me. I love that you don't even know that you're learning new stuff.
Right. Aw, that's really cute. They're working so hard.
They're like, yeah, today was so boring. I'm like, really? We could throw you in a brick and mortar? Nope, don't want to do that. Good, then it wasn't that boring, was it? I can promise you, you didn't have a boring day.
My kid came home the other day and said, "You'll never guess what happened. A wild Canadian goose almost landed right on my head."
Yeah, there's this beautiful pair of sandhill cranes that have been coming to the visitor center site for years, and a couple weeks when they came right on they came back on March 1st, and so the children saw them fly in right over our circle, our afternoon circle, and then within a couple days they were right in the yard, and about 6 of the children were on the deck and came face to face with the cranes. It was just, you know, one of those things that you can't create that in any other setting, and we know that those experiences are happening all the time for your children.
All day long.
All day long.
Yeah, the crane at Bird Hill last year, when you overheard a child say, because it was so close, so low, because we were so high up on this open field, and he says, "Oh, I felt like I could just ride on its back."
Yeah, that kinship.
Mm-hmm.
And the vocabulary, like,
Oh, yeah.
it's crazy to come up with the words that he comes up with. I'm like, I don't even know what that is.
And I appreciate too, when there's a problem at home, our 6-year-old was very much, I'm sure, something that you guys teach when there's, you know, an argument or something between 2 children. She'll say, "Okay, now how does this make you feel?" I've said for years, and so just to see these amazing things that they say, we notice that they're kinder to each other, they're able to talk through things much better. So we feel like we try to do those things, but seeing it from you guys too, they look up to you guys so much, so we appreciate that. All the wonderful songs that they learn and teach us
Sings
all
every
of the
night.
time. It's just magical.
Lullaby.
Yeah, it's just perfect, so we appreciate all of you.
Thanks,
I didn't
Brittany.
get to share my little story. I'm in the office most of the time. I go out multiple times a day, but I don't get to spend great lengths with the children, but I was out with them for about a half an hour today while the teachers were getting some lunch, and after they finished up, they went out to the yard to play, and there was probably 16 or 17 4- and 5-year-olds who created this game that they call Forest Fire. It's an actual game called Fire in the Forest, but they call it Forest Fire. And it's a tag game, and I stood way back, and I kid you not, these 4- and 5-year-olds worked out. They decided they were going to use rock, paper, scissors to figure out whose team was on whose team, and you can imagine with 16 of them standing around doing this, it was a little bit of a disaster, but there was no crying, there was no arguments, they just kept, okay, let's try again, and they would do it again until they got themselves sorted out on their teams, and then, you know, they just played their game, like there was zero adult interaction, and I was talking to the team about it after school, and we were just saying, like, they work together all day long and negotiate and compromise and team, and like, I've worked with kids of all ages, and I was watching them and I was like, middle schoolers couldn't do this. It was really incredible the way they could, work with one another, so.
And that's that very intentional environment that we provide for the children. So like the actual learning environment coupled inside of the natural environment, right? And so that's very intentional things that the teachers that we've spent days and years and hours talking about and working through to provide those opportunities for the children to experience and to practice those skills.
Is there ever any discussion about what, once the kids transition out of forest school will look like? I know we talk a lot about expanding and getting as far into 5th grade or, however far as possible, but whenever I want to chuckle, I think about the feral kids trying to reincorporate with the kids that have been in the classrooms all day.
Well, I'm already getting tears every morning with Evie goes, "Oh, summer school is coming," and Aubrey cries and goes, "I'm not going to be able to go to school." And I'm like, "Well, no, you get a little bit of a break." And she just falls on the floor and cries. And I'm just like, okay, we don't have to deal with that for a couple more weeks. So come on.
We do talk about that a lot, like how do we bring in elements of some of the traditional experiences that children need, like how do we group them together and have them sit and have individual work time. And so we try to really be mindful about the fact that what we're working on every day should translate into other settings. And well, obviously we haven't had the chance to see that yet, but yeah, it's
And I like
always
the term
different.
cross-pollination.
Yeah,
of
cross-pollination.
getting Lafarge, the regular school, to
Right.
incorporate
I
more
like
of
the idea
the.
of our kids being feral.
Well, I'm sure it's gonna be a bit of a transition on the Lafarge school side as well, just seeing all of these success stories, like seeing the kids, like, you know, my son is just reading and doing math. I think he's 4 years old. He's counting by, he went over to Rob's like, he's counting by tens. He counts by 10 and 4. Like, oh, my kid. But, you know, I mean, it's like, when he comes inside and there's other kids inside, like, he's still using all those same skills. He's like interacting with them. They want to work together fine, otherwise they're playing next to each other. So I imagine it won't be that terrible. I mean, similar to kids going to school when they never went to school before, it's just a little bit later. But there's going to be some transition, I'm sure.
Might just find them outside after they ask to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
I mean, for instance, like in my family, I have 6 younger siblings. We were all homeschooled, but my mom sent us to school when I was in 4th grade to make sure she wasn't screwing us up, which we can all debate that later. But it wasn't a hard transition for me or my siblings. It's just one of those things where you have to be mindful and be aware that kids are all at different stages of development, and kids coming from the forest school versus traditional school, those 3rd graders are going to have a different development. Some places they will be a lot ahead. The coordination, that sort of a thing, I think is far improved from the forest school, from what I've seen in public schools traditionally. But in other stages, they may not be nearly as ready to sit still and listen, and so that'll be interesting to see.
I think it's interesting, you know, one thing always to think about is kids are significantly more resilient than we are as adults. Like, we can kind of think about this transition period a lot and how hard, you know, it's probably hard for us to separate like how it would be for us, whereas oftentimes kids, they can just kind of, you know, they can be kids and they're gonna see other kids in school, and you know, often it works out well, it seems.
And there are ways that we know that we're preparing them that you might not think of also. Like, there's all the sensory, so children are really sensory beings. That's like their primary way of learning about the world is through their senses from the time they're babies. And so they're getting the opportunity to make the sensory pathways in their brains to absorb all of the sensory information that we receive as human beings all the time. But they're getting a lot of that, like being able to focus their eyes near and far and listen close and far, being able to walk on uneven ground, learning, you know, exercising their muscles to climb up trees and balance themselves and balance huge sticks, and all of that work that they're doing is wiring them to be able to receive sensory information, and it's also like actually all the like muscle development in their necks and their shoulders and their arms is super important to be able to manipulate a pencil, and all is like a part of them learning to read. All of those skills are really foundational to all the skills that we expect children to be able to do in school. And so we hope that it's preparing them really well to be learners and to be whole, grounded human beings in the world.
Also, we joke about our kids going to school and being feral, but the leadership that, you know, like you guys talking about the hike, being able to follow each other and to help each other. It's nothing saying that they're not gonna be the leaders when they go into their new, yes, it might be a new school and they might have 20 kids in their class that don't know them, but they might have 3, you know, that core friends, and those 3 can become the leaders, you know, instead of the 20 who have learned to follow one, it can be 3 that says, no, watch what I can do. I can show you things that you haven't learned, you know, differently.
And have that self-worth, that understanding that they can do hard things and that they are leaders and they know so much, and like you said, can show other people.
They can walk a mile with water in their boots.
I turned to a student today, I was like, you know, how does that feel? No, I asked him, I was like, are you going to do anything about it? He goes, no, that's okay. And he he's like just sloshing along, and you can hear he goes, splash, splash, splash. I like it like that. No, it's not your son.
I'd just like to say as part of the governance council that we're so honored to be part of this group. So we've always known how wonderful the teachers are and how wonderful the administrator and the consultants are, and the founders. And now I'm just in awe of the parents. So I just want to say thank you. It's really nice to hear all the support. I'm very moved because, you know, we all know what a special place this is, and to hear you all your stories is just really buoying. And I think this is a wonderful place, and so we're going to do everything we can to make it stay that way. So thank you.
Thank you, Prudence.
Did we get all the questions?
I think so.
I do have one more thing, that Breeley's mom is on virtual and sent me a video. Can I play that quick for you guys? If that's loud.
Thank you, TJ. Thank you so much.
So the meetings that you said you post on the snail mail emails, is that just for the Forest School, or is that like a Lafarge school meeting where you also talk about the Forest School?
No, so, the governance council for the Forest School meets the second Thursday of every month at 6 p.m. and it's all virtual. And that link is in snail mail, and it's also on the KVFS website. If there's a little drop down where you can go to events or a calendar, and it'll be there.
So there's one tomorrow?
There is one tomorrow. Yes, there's one tomorrow.
You get a bunch of people this month, and then you may
Yeah.
get a lot fewer afterwards.
So the Lafarge School,
Yeah, right.
there's a lot to do.
Right, we spread it out over a long time.
Yeah, they're all of them tomorrow. The Lafarge School Board has its own meetings. They meet on the third Monday of the month. And you're welcome to those as well. I don't think the KVFS is a topic of discussion all that often. There's usually a little update.
There's an
Little
update section,
Yep. And then the KVR has its own board meetings. They meet the third Thursday of the month. And so if KVFS was on those agendas and you had interest, or even if they aren't, you can attend those. All these meetings are open to the public.
And the minutes.
And what?
Mention the minutes being available.
Yes, and the minutes are all recorded for all three of these organizations because they're all public entities. So the agendas and the minutes have to be publicly posted.
In the documents on the
In the
website.
documents section on KVFS's website is where you can find ours. And last months are not there yet because they have to be approved. They'll be approved tomorrow night and then they'll be posted. So they're usually, the minutes are a month behind.
Is there any consideration for the governance council to be in-person meetings? Has that ever been discussed, or just turnout tonight?
Yeah, I know, it's nice, huh?
Very positive.
We can certainly talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, some of our governance council members live quite a ways away, but we could certainly have kind of a hybrid meeting and have a group of folks who would like to meet here or at somewhere, and then have the people who need to be remote participate that way too.
We have several parents, and we meet at 6 p.m., so it's supper time, so it's really nice to be able to kind of plug in at home, I think.
As a suggestion, would it be a decent idea to leave the normal government's meetings maybe alone, but schedule maybe every 3 months or something like this where it's in person, because it's kind of special getting everyone together in the same room, and this conversation wouldn't have happened online the same way.
Absolutely. I was thinking that earlier.
Yeah.
I think that quarterly or something like that would be, especially as we develop and there continues to be so much in question and to think about and talk about as a community. Yeah.
So obviously the pancake breakfast was probably a bigger hit than anybody thought it was going to be.
Yeah,
It was
great,
awesome.
thank
Is
Yeah,
there
thank you,
talks of
Jen.
another fundraiser coming up here this school year yet, or are we waiting till fall, midsummer?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We had anticipated a spring fundraiser, and we may do something in brief. The governance council is going to talk about that tomorrow night. A little spring like hike, walk, scooter on the trails kind of thing. But the leadership team has been talking about it, having at least 3 annual fundraisers, and somebody approached us recently about doing like a community square dance, and we thought it might be really fun to do like a fundraiser square dance in the fall, do the Heart of Winter in the winter, and then do some kind of a trail, bike ride, scooter, hike in the spring. So that's kind of, you know, we had one really successful event this year. Maybe next year we'll have 2 really successful events. The next year we can have all 3.
And then the end of the year lunch on the lawn.
Yeah, and then we always have the, well, the last 2 years we've had the last day of school lunch on the lawn. So that's just that pickup. Bring your picnic basket. Will of course all be in the snail mail, and have lunch with y'all together on the lawn on the last day of school.
And I'm assuming you're always accepting donations, correct?
Of what? No ducks. No goats.
I love that.
Yes. We'll take in general, we are.
Goats, but not for the school.
Right.
For the auction.
Just for the auction.
Yeah, for the auction.
That's right.
There you go. What's the weirdest thing someone's ever tried to donate?
Well, we did have these goats donated.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, it was for the Heart of Winter
Yeah, that was
auction.
Skylar's dad.
Yeah.
'Cause they have the, they have the fainting.
Yeah,
bed.
Deanna.
I wanted so badly to bid on them too.
Yeah, Joe's like, no, we're not writing it. And now he's like, well, if I'm talking to Skylar's dad, maybe we should get some. And I'm like, you know, they were bred to be fodder for our sheep, so.
But we did have a lot of
Maybe.
really unique donations. We had like venison packs, we had wood, we had the goats. It was
That bench was beautiful.
the bench. That was a really interesting, unique coming together for that.
And I think as that event grows and you all, you know, grow into our community, we'll have all the more connections with artisans and makers and crafters and doers in our community. So I think that'll really.
We need a chainsaw artist.
Yeah.
What do you want? I have all my fingers.
It's not disqualified.
Did you really?
Alright, well, it looks like it's 7:30 on the nose. And yeah, as Janelle said, yeah, just hit us up anytime with questions or ideas or thoughts. And we'll be in touch as things take shape for the next school year. And thanks again for all of your presence tonight and your support.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
and in person, you know, if you haven't been to the KVFS office, it's a little hard to find, but you come in the main visitor center where the front desk is, and you go down the long hall, and it's the last door on the right, and that's where my office is, and Summer, so one or the other of us pretty much is always in there, so you're welcome to stop in and drop big ideas on our table, and we'll take notes.
Or just drop off sick kids in there.
Yeah, or like the library books, or whatever. Library books.
That was you.
I think that too.
Do you know that Violet County over there?
Okay, no. We have Miss Robin. So,
I was like trying to teach it about
Okay. Violet was like,
Med.
bring them back.